Greetings. Welcome to my channel. My name is Val. If you are new here, I'm still kind of sorting out my role in this platform, trying to record and post more often. You might see shorts from Hank, who has been sleeping a lot during the daytime and hunting at night. As well as if you go into the archives, you can see some of my forest walks. Today, I really wanted to talk about alternative programming and how um, we are being challenged in today's society with the phones, the notifications, the disinformation, misinformation, the bro culture, the ownership of these large corporations that kind of control, um, you know, our everyday lives. And I've been thinking about this obviously for a really long time because in a recent video, I talked about being a college professor when the smartphones became predominant and how frustrating it was for me to intentionally try to get students off of their phones and even made a cell phone policy in my classes that talked about keeping this in airplane mode, that being in that particular class at that particular time and place was the only time you would ever have that type of experience, and how rewarding it would be to like get to know the people around you rather than constantly being seduced. It's a seductive thing by the technology and those offline or not in real person communication things that we have. I would even ask students to put their phones in airplane mode so that their parents wouldn't call them or text them in the middle of classes. This got a lot of pushback because it is an addictive thing. And there's a lot of statistics out there about this that I'm not going to get into. And we all know that we can feel like it is something that maybe we should put down, but we have coined the term doom scrolling because we know that it is this habit where we're just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And that is the trick, right? The trick is to keep us engaged in this material for our eyes and our dollars, and we willingly are giving up information. So this morning I was thinking about, um, what would happen if we didn't have this and we woke up today with the opportunity and it was given to us as like, hey, here's this great new thing, and you can sign up for all of these different types of platforms and you can connect with each other. Would we do that? I've been watching some older television shows because it gets so dark early here in the winter time, and just to kind of keep my mind, from being on a computer and from doom scrolling in those important hours before sleeping. I haven't necessarily gone all the way into reading books again, which is one of my goals, but I've been watching some television shows to kind of close and slow down so that I can get a better night's sleep. And some of these have been produced, the majority of them actually have been produced and released in the years around 2010, 2011 to 2014. And it's really fascinating to watch the um, the characters and how they are using the old kind of um, text messaging, flip phones, and that type of thing. And I know that there's kind of a movement for people to be, especially young people, are recognizing that they're spending too much time online and in these forums, that they want to go back to a more intentional use of this technology. So again, if we went and we had this question, we would ask ourselves, would we actually sign up for this new thing if we were told it would take 6 hours of our lives every day? Would you actually willingly sign up for that? Or did they dangle this little carrot and get us hooked on this information? They got us hooked on it. So when I was teaching in my early career as a professor, the the like MySpace was like a big thing, which I didn't really enjoy because it was very visually busy and cacophony, and it was primarily more for like music things, and it felt like it was like a pull on my time. And my students started coming to me and saying, "Hey, you need to join this Facebook thing. It's like all the rage, right?" So the the brilliant thing that the now billionaire um, who dropped out of college to do this, he started that company and only made it exclusive to .edu email addresses. That meant that the early adopters were all college students that bought into this and willingly gave up their information. At the time, it was very innocent in a way that it was a lot more conversational. There were not advertisements. And if you recall, they had like this little prompt of like what I'm doing today or how I'm feeling today or something like that. And technology over the last 20 years has obviously completely changed. But what they did by having those early adopters is they got a massive audience right off the bat who were willing to tag themselves on photos and to give information. And here we are today on the verge of a ban of a very popular app that we lived without for a very long time, but it is proven that the algorithm and the way that they conduct their system, and I don't use it, I've just been watching reports from scientists and people who are concerned about the addiction quality of these types of apps that and what they've done to like speed. You can like press the button or you can press the thing and it speeds up. So there's like a lot of not controversy, but concerns about the fact that too many young people are like speeding up information, so you're not actually learning it because you're like listening to it so fast. But this like doom scrolling has kind of become part of our society, and it is really, really difficult if you ask somebody who is um, has one of the quote unquote more common types of addictions that it is very difficult to kind of go cold turkey, so to speak. So one of the things that I am proposing is that as we enter this year of the snake 2025 and this escalation of bro culture and this kind of like patriarchal um, effort to maintain power in this machismo and masculine, whatever. If you look at your state's legislature, for example, it's probably predominantly white dudes and minimally women and minorities, right? So we are at this like precipice of this like pressure cooker of kind of old and progress and people wanting people like me and maybe you to be suppressed in some way, shape, or form. So again, how do we think about alternative programming in our own lives and what is the impact and what does that mean? So going cold turkey is really difficult. But we can make some efforts in a way that we are, for example, turning off notifications so that you don't have that Pavlov dogs type of immediate reaction to like responding to everything. You can put timers on your phone. So the 6 hour average is something that has been reported, especially for young people. And I find myself being very nostalgic for growing up without the cell phone and the opportunities to be bored or to be lazy or to watch TV all day or to go outside and goof around. So maybe this is an opportunity for us this year to kind of push back. And again, if we were given the opportunity out of nowhere to like join and sign our lives away on a daily basis, hours and hours and hours of our time, would we actually sign up for that now, or would we choose to do something different? So I'm going to bet that some of us would choose to do something different. And you might be feeling this like burning sensation in your inner soul of like, I know I need to do this. I just don't know how. Right. So I think building connections again that are not necessarily just online. So I recently saw that there's a book about society becoming more and more antisocial. And there are ways that we could potentially be creative in how we go about connecting to people that is not on the devices. The irony is we're creating content, and the the beauty of these applications and the social media has been that we can teach each other things. There's so many like random stuff online. My zipper on my coat was stuck the other day, so I found a YouTube video that was created like a few years ago that explained to me how to fix my video. So I'm not knocking the fact that there's this platform and opportunities for us to share our knowledge, share our opinions. But there's a lot of people who are monetizing the opinions and false information. So again, we are all against a battle. The other thing that I realized and I was thinking about today is that, and I'm going to share my screen here, and I don't know how to do this side by side thing that I see on so many channels, so you're just going to have to bear with me. Um, and I don't know if you saw this the other day, but they're doing confirmation hearings of the new cabinet that is supposed to be coming in next week. And Bernie Sanders was interviewing the candidate for Treasury Secretary. So let's just watch the conversation here.
The federal minimum wage, despite the efforts of myself and other people here, have not been raised since 2009 and remains an unbelievable $7.25 an hour. Will you work with those of us who want to raise the federal minimum wage to a living wage to take millions of Americans out of poverty?
Senator, I believe that the minimum wage is more of a statewide and regional issue.
So you don't think we should change the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour?
No, sir.
The federal minimum wage.
Okay, so in fact, there are, I'm going to move my video so I'm not staring off. Okay, so in fact, if you are aware of this or not, there's kind of a movement to actually get rid of a minimum wage. There are certain corporations in power in this rising oligarchy that we have of the uber wealthy that want us to be in our seats at a desk in an office making a certain amount of money for them, right? That they want to get rid of a minimum wage. And this reminds me of a trip to Europe and Ireland and thinking about how I've in the past been a server at a restaurant. So not only is the minimum wage a challenge, but in many cases, servers are making about $2 an hour. There was a campaign promise about not taxing tips. Well, it seems kind of farcical to even talk about that because a lot of times in that space, cash is not always um, declared, right? Or you're just not making a lot in tips comparatively to the $2 an hour. So you so when servers are working in a tourist area and get frustrated with the lack of tip money or the fact that they have to do a high volume to have tips, it's because people in other countries have a different system, right? The bartenders in Ireland make a salary. They are not reliant on $2 an hour and tips to live, right? So there's a reason why these corporations are trying to keep us in a particular working mode. And I was thinking about the fact that technically I started working at the age of 13. Well, that's not really legal, right? Because we had a labor movement more than 100 years ago that fought against child labor. There are actually governors and a certain party that is interested in reducing the age limit that you can legally work or getting rid of child labor laws altogether. Again, they're trying to get more and more people in the door to work at low wages. This is why manufacturing left our country years ago to other countries that have low wages. In the meantime, I almost am making this connection between the rise of the influencer and the rise of the social media um, platforms is the fact that those of us are in this particular kind of working class component, not the people who are making tons of money on the stock market or in the tech industry or coming up with the brilliant idea of becoming, the next CEO of whatever. Um, it's about this flattening out of how we are able to earn an income ourselves, not reliant on these types of systems of like a minimum wage. So it kind of makes sense, right? That people are flocking to these other types of alternatives for sharing how to fix a zipper, how to fix your lawnmower, how to do whatever, or the opinions or whatever types of channel they might be. The influencer has become kind of like the thing that people want to do, whereas it used to be like I would become famous as an actor or a basketball player or a football player, for example, right? So it has allowed a lot more people access to the opportunities that a minimum wage type of job doesn't allow. Now, one of the crazy thing is Bernie Sanders here talks about the minimum wage not being raised since 2009. And one of the things, as a former graphic design professor, that I recall a lot was that an organization that I was involved in did an annual salary survey. So they sent out a, a survey of all of their members, like 30,000 members or whatever the membership was. And they got back every year and then they published it. And I have these booklets from that time period somewhere in my library here, which I might pull out. And do another video about, but I wanted to sit down and do this morning. Anyway, what I noticed over time as a graphic design professor, as I was getting this content year after year after year, is that the salary was the same. After 20 years, the salary was the same. In my efforts to reduce my time on social media, I try to limit myself to only a few minutes on a daily basis. This morning, in fact, I noticed a post by someone who's a recent graduate with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in graphic design and wanted advice from this group of graphic designers that is this great community, right? So the social opportunity that we have to connect to people across the globe is phenomenal. So they were disappointed in the fact that they went through all of these different interviews and how much time that took, maybe 10 hours of their time or something like that. And then they got the offer for about $38,000 a year to live in Florida. So my response to them this morning was that that has been kind of a standard starting salary for more than 20 years. So this is where we are. We are in this age of a growing economic um, gap, right? And there's all sorts of content out there, especially like Bernie Sanders and all of these Robert Reich and all of these other economists that talk about this problem between this rise of the uber wealthy. The problem is they have been able to influence their legislative people who make rules about how much money they have to pay in taxes. So this year is going to be a little bit nutty. We don't know what this year is going to be. So I wanted to kind of throw out some alternatives, again, alternative programming. And before I do that, I wanted to show you this book about the anxious generation. So I saw the author on their tour, and The Daily Show on Comedy Central is a really great kind of news commentary. They're not news journalists, but they talk about kind of the news of the day with a bit of humor, right? So we need to have humor in our lives to continue in that quest for what is the essence of being human and our time on the planet. Well, the anxious generation, they've actually gone in and seen surveys and can establish that when there was a shift to the smartphone from the little button phone, it became globally an issue, especially with young people and young women in kind of body image issues, all sorts of things. So what we want to do is we want to combat this. So if you're a parent of a young person, there are countries that have already banned what is going to be banned this week. And it's kind of like a parent saying, hey, you can't have the super sugary cereals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Like, come on, you know, forget all the things about like sharing our personal information and the propaganda in it, but like, let's take it as this kind of like almost going cold turkey from these things that are super addictive. And what can we do instead? So one of the things we can do is go out into nature. And I talk about that a lot in my videos. And I hope to kind of transform my Forest Friday videos. There weren't a lot of viewers of those, so I'm really trying to think about like what type of content to be able to share with you. But one of the most important things that we can do in helping our aging brains, helping our bodies, helping our brains is to spend time actively doing something, including in nature. So there are all sorts of health benefits that have been proven for this. Now, I actually went through a training to become certified as a forest therapy guide. In that, we talk about the fact that and I'm going to stop sharing here for a second. The forest is actually the therapist and I'm just the guide. Why do you need a guide to be in nature for this type of experience? Is because we are so attuned and like the Pavlov's dogs thing to these devices that is very difficult for us to put those away and spend really quality time in the particular moment. So there's all sorts of videos and content out there about how important this is and the benefits of forest bathing, for example. So there are some I think the UK started to say that people under 16 shouldn't have access to social media. So there are certain things of like this parental, like you got to go into timeout. Um, so one of the things that I think about too is how we can do this alternative programming. And what I would recommend is if you can't get out into nature and you're really trying to um, find alternative things to do with your time, right? volunteering, learning a new skill, um, volunteering at the Humane Society, volunteering at the senior center, talking with the elderly, um, volunteering at a community space, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. There's all sorts of organizations that are in your community that would love to have your valuable time where you're not, where you can like intentionally put the device away. Getting out in nature, as I've also explained. So, some of the other alternatives that I've been thinking about are how can we, as creative people and also um, in gender roles that are not in the majority of the white dude bro, kind of combat this kind of giant thing, this giant mechanism that's out there. So I propose that maybe you get together with some friends that you haven't seen in a while, start a book club, start a Zoom conversation once a week in alternative programming. So, for example, football on Sunday nights is a very machismo industry. They make lots of money on advertisements. It's all the way filtered down, all the way into like pee-wee clubs, right? It's Friday Night Lights. It's part of a giant machine. Well, maybe instead of doing that, you have a craft conversation with your friends on a Sunday night. Or you switch the type of sports you're interested in and you watch the women's basketball or the women's soccer team. So those are some options. And I found um, I went to a really interesting I lost myself here for a second. I went to a really interesting presentation a year or so ago. So look in your community. Is there a science center? Is there a history center? Are they offering opportunities for listening to a speaker or listening to a writer or a poetry session or a festival of some sort? So I went to this history museum um, for a luncheon, and it was about the history of tea rooms. And I found this to be a really fascinating thing. And I'm just planting the seeds out there that maybe one person or more people might get the bug and start this again. I'm contemplating it myself in some amalgamation. But the top secret history of tea rooms is because women at the time were not allowed to be in kind of like a public setting, right? Not allowed to do things. We know that the 70s is really when women were allowed to have bank accounts, credit cards, sign your own, you could buy your own things. You didn't have to have a husband to do that, right? These are all the things these are all the advances that people are pushing back against for the last 50 or more years, right? This group of people in power do not want a particular demographic to have their autonomy. In my class that I used to teach about books, I bring up Malala, who was shot as a student on a bus in Afghanistan. She survived. And there are some really interesting TED Talks with her father talking about women's education. So we can see globally that there's a suppression of women and women voices and what women look like and how they're allowed to be seen and women being able to access education and the empowering of that, what that happens, right? And thank goodness I'm here where I am now, and I'm not in a place like Afghanistan, where the Taliban have recently made a rule that women cannot even be seen through windows. So they are blocking off a lot of public facing windows in their cities and communities. to me, that just doesn't make any sense because it's also like a fire hazard and an escape thing. And like, who's staring at windows is a bunch of peeping Toms. Like, I don't even want to go there. But I'm really grateful that I was born where I was born at the particular time that I was born. And I've had the experiences of life before the internet. And I am very deeply nostalgic for that time. And how can I kind of reconnect with the significance of what all these things are available to us without these devices? Now, granted, this is a great way to connect, and I don't have to beat that over and over again. We all understand why we are on the social media. But anyway, this top secret tea rooms. So it was really, really interesting to go to this presentation a few years ago with the History Museum up in about an hour and a half away from me. So don't let the the location deter you from accessing some of these unique opportunities. Um, so this history of women and kind of like an underground movement, we also are aware of like the Underground Railroad, for example. One of the other things that I get I think about a lot is a book that I read for this books class that I developed when I was teaching full time. And I think about this book very often and how the story of the people in this particular place and time in an occupied um, island of France occupied by young German soldiers and what they did to kind of survive this particular time period. And it had to do with cooking. It had to do with community and kind of like going under the radar and creating their own little community of neighbors and friends and kind of being on the down low and being subversive, having their own garden, and how they would kind of connect with each other to kind of subvert the the curfew, the night curfew, and some of the other things. Like the German soldiers were like taking all of their produce that they were growing, and it's a really great book that is good for book clubs because of the resources that are available for you. And it's also an epistolary novel, which means that it's composed in a lot of letters, short and long. Sometimes there are, what's it called? Not text message, like early, like before text messaging, text messages would be uh, telegrams, which is now like a word for another messaging app. But anyway, telegrams. So it was also turned into a movie, which I haven't seen, right? So when we start thinking about how we progress and move into a year of uncertainty, the final thing that I'm going to recommend in this alternative programming is thinking about how we spend our time as well as our resources. So, are we going to purchase the whatever, the bigger television or the vacation at a resort or whatever? Or do we spend that on ourselves? Do we invest in ourselves? Maybe there's something that we want to learn or do, right? Maybe we need more than 2 weeks off. Maybe you're planning something to like start a new job, but you want to like have a month off in between to invest in ourselves. What does that look like? I've been thinking about like if I had a teacher in the shop class that I took when I was in junior high school who was more encouraging than demoralizing, so to speak, who taught me how to use all of these power tools. But in the end of the semester, or it was actually quarters, he basically said to me, "What do you think you deserve for a grade?" And I remember not feeling confident in the would item that I made. We had to make stools and we had to make a couple other things. And I remember like the lack of confidence, but that I really enjoyed it. And I remember him saying, I said, well, I'll get a B. And he said to me, I was going to give you an A, but since you said a B, I'm going to give you a B. And what would have happened if that teacher long time ago had said, yeah, well, you're better than a B. I'm going to give you the A that you deserve. Maybe I would have gone into a craft. Maybe I would have been more interested in furniture design than graphic design. Maybe I would have had more power tools. Maybe I would have gone into welding, all of these other things, right? So that little drop influenced my and created an obstacle into the could haves, the would have, could have, should haves. The other thing that I've been thinking about is like in PE classes in high school, we had um, like every couple of weeks we did different types of outdoor activities. And I remember taking archery, and one of these TV shows that I've been watching recently had an archery person who was not doing good things with the archery, but they were also not hunting animals. Um, and it made me look up like how much is it to get into archery? And I have land and I've been really thinking about archery for like 5 or 10 years. Maybe this is the year that I want to purchase a entry level archery equipment and try it out, right? So how can we create this alternative programming than the doom scrolling and the content that is being pumped at us by algorithms? That is being pumped at us by um, this artificial intelligence. Like everything I log on to is, I didn't give permission, like I don't want it, but it's like all automatic now that you search something and it's like, this is AI generated, or you're on the Facebook and it's like, everything is like, press this button to auto create an image or press this button to auto, like they've just sucked us into it without our permission. And I'm someone who grew up watching science fiction movies before Y2K, and I'm like, hasn't everyone watched Terminator? Hasn't anyone watched like the apocalyptic type movies like Blade Runner and, when we're out of water and there's, all of these different things, these crises can happen. We have literally just handed over our time and our ideas and our value almost to these larger kind of elite people who may not have our best interests at hand because they want us in the seats and they want us to only make minimum wage or whatever. So I'm here to just say, I encourage you to think about how you can make alternative programming in your own life. And I'm trying to figure out how that um, how I'm using this particular channel as my exclusive social media access. It is where I spend the most time, and I'm enjoying learning from other content creators in this platform. So I'm going to close with just reminding you of who I am. And if you've watched this whole thing, I'm new to this, and it would be really awesome to get some new subscribers this week in particular. So thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.